You ever stand in your own kitchen and feel like a stranger in your own life? That was me, last Wednesday. The smell of garlic chicken still lingered from dinner, dishes stacked neatly in the sink, fridge humming like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. Laura stood across from me in her faded college hoodie, arms crossed like she was bracing for a storm. Except I was the one trembling inside. "I just don't feel like it anymore," she said, not even meeting my eyes. Her voice was flat, like she was reading a weather report. "Cold front moving in. Expect long-term emotional frostbite." We were talking about intimacy, or more precisely, the 8 months of silence in our bedroom that had turned into a glacier between us. "You don't feel like it anymore?" I echoed, barely recognizing the sound of my own voice. "Laura, we haven't." I stopped. The words felt indecent in the quiet. She finally looked at me, but not with guilt or grief. Just blankness. "I'm tired. Work's been a lot. I just can't pretend to want something I don't." Pretend. That word hit me harder than I let on. She made it sound like every time I reached for her hand at night, it was a performance she had to endure. "I'm not asking for a performance," I said, keeping my voice low. "I'm asking to feel like I still matter to you. Like I still exist in this marriage." She gave a half shrug and turned to wipe crumbs from the counter. Not out of care, but like she wanted to clean up the mess of this conversation before it stained the floor. "We're just in different places, Michael," she said. "Maybe it's just a phase." A phase? Like acne or late-night cravings. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because deep down, part of me had known. The late nights. The way she flinched when I reached for her. The polite smiles at dinner like I was a coworker she had to tolerate. This woman, who once fell asleep on my chest to old movie reruns, now couldn't spare a touch, a glance, a single word that didn't feel surgically detached. I looked around the kitchen, our kitchen, the fridge magnets from vacations, the spice rack I built from scratch, the fruit bowl she insisted on filling with oranges no one ever ate. All of it screamed life. But the silence between us made it feel like a mausoleum. I stepped back from the counter, breath catching. "Is there someone else?" She laughed, and not kindly. "No, Michael. Not everything is about cheating. Some things just die quietly." And just like that, I had nothing to say. Because I was watching her choose silence over solution, distance over discomfort. And for a man like me, loyal, hopeful, stubborn, that was the cruelest cut. This was the woman I'd married. My Laura. But standing there, arms folded like a judge, she felt like a stranger wearing her face. And I felt like a man on trial for caring too much. But here's what she didn't know. This was the moment something shifted. Something deep. Not loud. Not explosive. Just clear. I walked out of that kitchen not with anger, but with a quiet, aching dignity. Because if she was done fighting for us, I'd have to start fighting for me. And that fight, it had only just begun. The next morning, the sun rose like nothing had changed. But something had. Inside me, the air felt heavier, like I was breathing through a straw. I stood at the kitchen counter pouring coffee into the mugs we'd bought during our honeymoon in Asheville. She used to call them our weekend warrior cups. Now they just looked like props from a past life. Laura sat at the dining table, scrolling through her phone, legs tucked under her in that casual way that used to feel like home. She didn't look up when I walked in. "I thought maybe we could talk," I said, placing her mug beside her, careful not to let it clink too loud on the table. "Not about last night. Not yet. Just about us." She let the silence stretch as she sipped her coffee, still staring at the screen. Then, finally, "I don't know. That's all." Not a yes. Not a no. Just a shrug of words. "I was thinking maybe we could see someone," I continued. "A counselor. Just to help us figure out what's going on. Together." Another sip. Another scroll. Maybe. Do you know how sharp a word like that can be? It's not a knife. It's a slow drip of rejection. Not enough to scream over, but enough to wear you down minute by minute. She didn't even look at me. Just thumbs tapping, eyes fixed on her screen like it held answers I couldn't offer. My hand tightened around my own mug. I had rehearsed this moment. How I'd come in with calm and compassion, suggest real solutions, and show her I was willing to fight for us. "But you can't fight for two people alone. You said we're in different places," I said quietly. "That's fine. But if one of us starts walking away without even trying, then we're not just in different places. We're done." She looked up then, Finally. Not with anger. Worse, with indifference. I'm not walking away. I'm just tired. She said it like being tired made everything okay. Like being tired gave her a pass to emotionally ghost her own husband under the same roof. And something inside me started to settle. Not break, just settle. Like a foundation giving up on a house that kept shaking. I nodded, more to myself than her. Okay, I won't bring it up again. Her eyes flicked up with the faintest trace of confusion. Maybe she expected me to keep pushing, to beg, to chase. But I didn't, because in that moment, I knew begging would only shrink me. So I turned away, poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. My appetite had gone somewhere I couldn't follow. That gray morning stretched like wet wool. I went through the motions, shower, shave, the drive to work. But everything felt muted, like the world had dimmed its colors, just a little. And yet, underneath it all, something began to harden. Not resentment. Not yet. But the early scaffolding of resolve. If she wouldn't look at me, not really, then maybe it was time I started seeing myself again. Not through her tired eyes, but through my own. I didn't plan to change anything. Not at first. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was just done waiting. Done hoping that one more gentle conversation might spark something in her again. The first shift came on a Tuesday. My buddy Sam invited me to shoot hoops at the local rec center. It had been years since I'd joined them. Always too tired, or tied up in some domestic plan Laura had made. This time, I said yes. And something happened that night under the clang of rims and echo of sneakers. I laughed. A full, chest-deep laugh I hadn't heard in a long time. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for months. After that, I started going twice a week. No announcement. No explanation. I'd come home from work, grab my bag, and walk out the door while Laura scrolled on the couch. She never asked where I was going. Then came the barbershop. It had been years since I'd gotten a real cut. I used to tell myself I liked keeping things simple, but the truth is, I'd stopped caring. This time, I walked in, showed the guy an old photo of myself from before the wedding, and said, "Give me that guy back." He did. The mirror didn't lie. I looked sharper, lighter, like the man I used to be was slowly re-emerging from beneath layers of routine and resignation. I bought new clothes. Nothing flashy, just clothes that fit right. That felt good. I signed up for a gym membership. At first, I'd go late at night, after Laura had gone to bed. There was something about lifting weights under quiet fluorescent lights that felt like therapy. I wasn't trying to become anyone new. I was just remembering the version of me I liked best. A few weeks in, I noticed something. Laura started pausing. Not long, just small flickers of attention, her eyes trailing me for a second longer than before when I walked past. A faint, almost confused expression the night I wore a new shirt to dinner. "You look different these days," she said one morning over coffee, her voice flat but curious. I waited for a follow-up question, a real invitation to talk. It never came. I just gave a small smile. "Yeah, I feel different." She nodded vaguely and went back to her phone. That was the thing. She noticed, but she didn't ask. Not why I was out late. Not where I'd been. Not even what brought the change. And maybe that should have hurt more. But strangely, it didn't. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't changing for her. I wasn't waiting on her approval or attention. I was finally showing up for me. At the barbershop, the guy called me boss. At the gym, a trainer said, "You've got natural strength." At the basketball court, someone passed me the ball and said, "Take the shot." And I did. Not just on the court. In life. Each small win stitched together something that had been torn loose inside me. I wasn't whole yet. Not even close. But I wasn't hollow anymore, either. And Laura, she wasn't sure what to make of that. Which, in a quiet way, felt like the start of something very, very interesting. It was a Saturday, late afternoon, and the backyard buzzed with laughter, clinking bottles, and the faint crackle of a playlist someone had put on shuffle. My friend Paul was grilling, the smoke drifting through the air with that perfect charcoal meats marinade scent. I stood near the cooler, sipping a beer and letting the sun warm the back of my neck. It felt good to be surrounded by people again, noise, energy, connection. And then she showed up. Abby, a friend of Paul's wife. Blonde, bright-eyed, loud in the best way. She had that easy way of laughing with her whole face. We'd only exchanged a few words throughout the day, small talk about the burgers, the weather. But after a few drinks, she wandered over and grinned at me with a playful squint. You know, she said, motioning at my button-down shirt and cleaner shave. If you were single, I'd definitely steal you for coffee. I blinked, caught off guard. Then I laughed, not because I didn't believe her, but because it landed like a flare in a dark sky. It had been so long since anyone flirted with me, even as a joke. But this didn't feel like a joke. And then I felt it, that small, electric flicker of being seen. Guess I should be flattered, I said, raising my bottle toward her in a mock toast. Guess you should. She winked and wandered off, leaving the moment trailing behind her like perfume. I stood there for a second, trying to brush it off. But something shifted in the way I was standing. Straighter, lighter. That's when I saw Laura. She was across the yard, by the fire pit, holding a plastic cup and talking to someone from Paul's office. But her eyes were locked on me. Not subtly, not vaguely, and not with indifference. For the first time in months, maybe longer, she looked uncertain. I met her gaze for just a second. Long enough. Her expression didn't say jealousy. It said something stranger, like she had tripped on an unexpected thought and wasn't sure whether to catch it or pretend it didn't happen. That glance was a crack in her armor. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd seen in a long time. Later, after the sun dipped and the fairy lights took over, I found myself surrounded by a few guests laughing at some story I was telling. Nothing special, just one of those remember when tales from college that somehow landed perfectly. And there it was again, that easy, effortless confidence. Not forced, not performative, real. When I looked up, I caught Laura watching me again. This time, she looked conflicted. She turned away fast, as if embarrassed to be caught looking. And I thought to myself, now she sees it. Not a revenge glow-up, not some game, just the man I used to be, the man she once chose, stepping back into his own skin. And maybe she wasn't ready for that. The last guest had barely made it to their car when Laura spoke. She stood in the kitchen, arms folded tight, lips pressed thin. The counter was cluttered with half-empty platters and sticky glasses, but her attention was locked on me like I was the mess. You were really putting on a show tonight, she said. I turned from the sink slowly. What show? She gave a tight laugh. Don't play dumb, Michael. You were basically flirting with that Abby woman all night. I paused. Not defensive, just tired. Was I? You were grinning like a schoolboy every time she came near you, and telling stories like you were trying to impress half the backyard. I reached for a dish towel, drying my hands carefully before speaking. I was talking to friends, laughing, being myself. Is that a problem? She didn't answer right away. Her mouth opened, then closed. It just looked performative, like you were trying to act single. That word, single. I set the towel down. The room suddenly felt too still. I met her eyes, not angry, just clear. You know what's strange, Laura? It's strange to feel more appreciated by strangers than by your own wife. Her face twitched. Not much, but enough to show that landed. I didn't shout. I didn't lecture. I just walked past her, down the hall, into the bedroom. And I started packing. Not my bags. Not yet. Hers. One drawer at a time. I pulled out her folded shirts, her sweaters, the delicate blouses she hadn't worn in weeks. I laid them in a suitcase with the same careful energy I might have used if I was helping a friend pack for a trip. Gentle, precise, detached. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't huff and puff. There was no storm of emotion. Just silence. Intentional, decisive silence. From the doorway, Laura watched. She didn't ask what I was doing. Maybe she already knew. Where are you putting those? She finally asked, voice brittle. The guest room, I said. It's made up. A beat of silence. She didn't protest, didn't lash out. Just stood there, watching as her presence was folded into neat piles and moved to a different corner of the house. When I wheeled the suitcase down the hall, her steps followed behind, soft, hesitant. I opened the guest room door, set the bag by the bed, and turned back toward her. We've been roommates for months, Laura, I said. This just makes it official. She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the floor. I waited for her to say something, anything, but silence was all she offered. So I gave her one last look, then walked back to my bedroom. Alone, but lighter. Not because I wanted to be, but because I refused to keep carrying the weight of someone else's disinterest. And in that quiet, echoing space. I started to remember what it felt like to live on my own terms again. The silence stretched for days. No text, no calls, no notes on the fridge. The house had never felt so still. Not hostile, just quiet in a way that made everything echo. The hum of the fridge, the shuffle of my footsteps, even the click of the light switch sounded sharper now. Laura stayed in the guest room. I knew because I saw the light under the door at night and heard the faucet run in the hall bathroom in the mornings. But we didn't cross paths much. And when we did, just a glance, a nod, a silent agreement not to speak. It wasn't peace. It was a ceasefire. Then, one evening, just as I was rinsing out a protein shaker, my phone buzzed. A text. From her. Can you pick me up from Katie's? That was it. No apology. No preamble. Just a soft request, like we hadn't been wrapped in layers of emotional frost for weeks. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Katie was her best friend. Sharp, talkative, the kind of person who always seemed to be orchestrating dinner parties and weekend plans. She lived in a downtown apartment with her husband, Adam, and the two of them had always struck me as surprisingly tender. I texted back one word. Okay. No emoji. No question mark. Just enough to confirm I was coming. When I pulled into the circular drive outside Katie's building, the scent of takeout wafted through the glass doors as someone exited with a brown bag. Inside, the lobby was warm and dimly lit, soft music playing overhead, something jazzy and slow. I saw her sitting on the bench near the elevator, jacket folded over her lap like a schoolgirl waiting for a ride home after rehearsal. Her eyes met mine, uncertain. She stood slowly, walking toward me without a word. Just a tiny half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thanks, she said as I opened the passenger door for her. I nodded. No problem. The drive was short, quiet. The streetlights passed overhead in long shadows. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. She didn't check her phone, didn't fidget, just sat still, like she was afraid to shift the balance of things. Adam and Katie seem good, I said, mostly to break the quiet. She exhaled softly. Yeah, they are. Nothing more. When we pulled into the driveway, I cut the engine but didn't move. She didn't either. We sat there, both looking forward, both aware of everything that had been said and unsaid between us. I'll be in early tomorrow, I said, finally. Conference call at 7. She nodded. Okay. Still, neither of us moved. There was something heavy in the air, like both of us wanted to say something, but neither could figure out how to start. Eventually, she opened the door and stepped out. The car light illuminated her face just long enough for me to see it. Not anger. Not pride. Just hesitation. And for the first time in weeks, I wondered if maybe something inside her was starting to thaw. But I didn't chase it. I just let the night hold its quiet. Because if there was going to be a next move, it wouldn't be mine. Katie's kitchen was small, warm, and lit with one soft pendant bulb that cast a buttery glow over the countertops. I hadn't expected to be standing there. Not at that hour. Not with Laura. Especially not with her this close. Her friend and Adam had stepped out for a walk, sensing something in the air. Maybe they knew this was overdue. Laura stood by the sink, nursing a mug of chamomile like it was armor. I leaned against the opposite counter, arms folded, not out of defense, but to keep my hands from shaking. I didn't ask you to come in just to be polite, she said after a long silence. I figured. I wanted to talk. Another silence. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with meaning. I nodded. I'm listening. She looked up at me. Really looked, for the first time in a while. Her face was bare, her hair pulled back. No gloss, no pretense. Just Laura. Tired, a little frayed, and something else. Vulnerable. I miss being close to you, she said quietly. Not just physically. I missed us. The way we used to laugh. The way I could just reach for your hand without thinking. I felt something catch in my chest. She went on. Seeing Katie and Adam tonight, it reminded me of what we had, what we lost, and how I pulled away when I should have leaned in. I didn't interrupt. She needed to say it. I kept telling myself I was tired, that I needed space. But I think what I really needed was to feel seen. And I didn't know how to ask for that without making you feel unwanted. But I never stopped wanting you. I just stopped knowing how to show it. I studied her for a moment. And now, her eyes shimmered a little, but she didn't look away. Now I see you. Not just the man you were, but the one you are now. And he's strong, confident, kind. You've always been those things, but I forgot. Or maybe I stopped looking. My voice came out lower than I expected. It hurt Laura, feeling like I was invisible in my own marriage. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. Truly. I never meant to make you feel less than. I just got lost. The room was quiet except for the hum of Katie's fridge. And in that quiet, I stepped closer. You know, I said, my voice steady. You don't get to throw someone's heart in a drawer and expect it to stay exactly where you left it. I don't, she said. I really don't. But I'm asking if maybe it could find its way back. We stood a foot apart, maybe less. And for the first time in what felt like years, I reached out. Not out of duty, out of hope. Her hand met mine, small, familiar, trembling. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it since spring. We have a long way to go, I said softly. I know. This doesn't erase everything. I wouldn't want it to, she said. I want us to remember. So we never go back there again. I nodded once. And then, as the evening deepened into quiet shadows, we sat down at the small table. Two people who'd been strangers under the same roof, finally finding a way back. Not to what we were, to what we could be. Thank you for joining Michael's story. If it moved you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever fought to rebuild something that nearly broke? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, subscribe. More stories are coming. See you in the next one.